Good morning. Welcome to King Sports News Hour for the sixth day in the 12th month now, the 16th year of Changi. Tim Ildes sitting in for the second king of Chengdu, Kyung Moon. We have a lot of stuff going on today. A lot. Major, really major development in China, we think. Relevant. They like that word, relevant. Announcement by the relevant government spokesman. So we'll be getting into that. And then we'll speculate on what it means. And other stuff as well. So, yes, we'll get into that. But first, of course, let's take our jaunt, our sojourn around the kingdom right now in Chongpyeong, Tennessee. 27 degrees and mostly cloudy. High of 34 today, cloudy and colder. Some snow this morning, followed by an icy mix this afternoon, 1 to 2 inches. And in case you didn't know, snow can make roads and sidewalks slippery. Ah, no, I never knew that. Okay. But AccuWeather is being kind enough to tell us those of us who have never seen snow before. Um, I saw one person one time who was experiencing snow for the first time, and they thought that snow was warm. So they would charging, they would charging out of the house in their bare feet to frolic in the snow, but they quickly discovered that no, it is not warm. Anyway, so tonight, sleet and freezing rain, ice can cause dangerous travel. Yes, okay, thank you. All right, low of 31 degrees tonight. And then father's hometown. Yes, father's hometown still going through this very, I would say, dangerously cold period. Right now, it's 6 degrees above zero in Fahrenheit, but the real field is 1 degree below zero. Clear skies. Tonight, clear and cold, going down to 3 degrees below zero. And as I'm sure you know by now, 4 degrees below zero is 20 degrees, minus 20 degrees on the Celsius scale. So this is very cold, dangerously cold if you don't have the proper means to stay warm, which I think people in the rural areas or people outside of Pyongyang often do not. Anyway, I think we need to pray for the people who are, holding the fort, so to speak, in Cheongju until we can get there. Sunshine today or tomorrow, I'm sorry, tomorrow. Sunshine but cold, high of 23 degrees. And at the Cheongung Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania, also cold. Oh, actually, even colder, 2 degrees above zero, and clear skies, and then some sun, then increasing clouds, brisk and bitterly cold, and high of 18 degrees today. Tonight, cloudy and cold, snow toward dawn, accumulating an inch or two, a low of 5 degrees. Those are all temperatures on the Fahrenheit scale. And let's see here. Okay, Texas, warmer, yes, but still, yeah, okay. We're right now currently 31 degrees with a freezing rain, and they're getting that for continuously for at least an hour from now. Periods of sleet and freezing rain, breezy and quite cold. And yes, the people in Texas may need to be told that ice can cause dangerous travel, tree damage, and power outages. High of 35 degrees today, so maybe some of it will melt. Most of it perhaps will melt today. But then freeze again in the night because it's going to get down to 18 degrees tonight, so that will make it even more dangerous. Breezy and quite cold with a bit of ice. Okay, but whatever melts during the day, it looks like it's going to freeze again tonight, and that'll make it even worse because it will be very smooth ice. Anyway, better, shall we say, weather at the Suncheon Palace in Korea. 31 degrees, mostly clear right now, partly cloudy and cold tonight, getting to the 19 degrees. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy, a high of 38. And Gunma, Japan, partly cloudy, 34 currently, 24 for a low tonight. Tomorrow, breezy and cooler with partial sunshine, high of 41. Guangdong, China, clear 66, clear skies, and right now and through the night, 55 degrees for low. Tomorrow, hazy sun, high of 74. All right, let's go to Father's Word. Okay. Father's Word. Oops. Okay. All right, I am in the book on the true parent or two parents. As I've explained before, there's no distinction in Korean between singular and plural in most cases. So is this book titled The True Parents or is it titled The True Parent? I don't know. So you have to figure that out yourself, depending on the context. All right, and we're in chapter 4, which is titled 참풍의 사명, the mission of the true parent. I think here singular is probably the correct mission of the true parent. And then section 2 is subtitled 참부모의 길, the path of the true parent. And so we're in 참부모, the book of 참부모, chapter 4, and then section 2 of chapter 4. 지금 세계에서는 싸움이 벌어지고 있습니다. There are fights going on today in the world. Yes. 이것을 누가 선대해야 되겠습니까? 우리가 해야 됩니다. Who is going to, well, literally put their hands on this? In other words, who is going to, fix this? Who's going to make people stop fighting? And the answer is not, Father does not say me. He says, we, we, okay? So you are not observers. We are not observers. Father is roping us in on this. 우리가 해야 됩니다. We must do it. We must do it. 공산당과 싸우고, yes, there you go, fight against the Communist Party. 윤리 반도도 방어해야 되고, and we must defend the ethical standard. 종교가 무너지니 그것도 방어해야 됩니다. Religions are falling, religions are collapsing, so we must also defend those. This is, by the way, June 6th, 1982. And Father says, 선생님이, and 선생님, of course, is the basically one of the ways, or one of the main ways that he referred to himself in the third person. 선생님이 세계 학자와, which by the way is common in Korean. 선생님이 세계의 학자와 신학자들을 모아서 이런 문제들을 심각하게 토의하고 있습니다. So I am gathering the scholars and the theologians of the world and debating these issues seriously. So he's also roping in, it's not just us, okay? It's not just Blessed Sister families. He's also involving the scientists or scholars, I guess, yeah, scholars and theologians of the world, from around the world, internationally. 미국이 꿈도 안 꾸는 것을 하고 있다는 것이 이겁니다. I'm doing things that the United States cannot even dream of. Okay. And I think that applies today as well as it did in, what was that, 1982? What did I say? Anyway, I gave you the date. All right, so what's happening in China? Yes. Let's go and see what's happening in China. Where did that go? Okay. Okay. Let's go to CNN. A number of media outlets are reporting this information, but let's go to CNN. It's also on the Wall Street Journal, and I think probably others, although I have not researched it a lot, but here we go. China's top general under investigation in latest military purge, right? And who is this top general? Well, it's none other than Zhang Youxia. And we've been hearing about this guy most of this year, or last year, I'm sorry, most of last year we were hearing about this guy, especially in October, September, August, especially, right? And we were hearing, erroneously it turned out, that he was actually running the country, that Xi Jinping had been sort of pushed aside, might even be in the hospital, might not even be alive, and Zhang Youxia, who was the top sort of general, had taken over, this kind of a thing. And of course, that Later it turned out not to be true. But now we hear that he is now sort of being pushed aside, except that this time it's not rumor, it's not speculation. It's an official announcement by the Ministry of Defense. So this is much, much more serious. The Chinese military's top general is being investigated for suspected serious violations of discipline. What would that be? That would be doing something that got on the wrong side of Xi Jinping, obviously, a violation of discipline, discipline and law. The defense ministry said Saturday. So this is today. This was announced just hours ago. Zhang Youxiao, the senior of the two vice chairs of the powerful Central Military Commission, is the latest figure to fall in a long-running purge of military officials. Okay, as we know that. Analysts believe the purges are designed both to reform the military and to ensure loyalty to Chinese leader Xi Jinping, who also chairs the Military Commission. They are part of a broader anti-corruption drive that has punished more than 200,000 officials since Xi came to power in 2012. And of course, in every dictatorship, I would say, yeah, I think we can paint this with a broad brush. Every dictatorship, the first thing a dictator does when they come to power is they start an anti-corruption drive, right? And then they use the anti-corruption drive to target their opponents. Obviously, when you first come to power as a dictator, you've had to step on a few people, or more than a few people, in order to get there. And you've got to do something with them. You can't let them stay there so that they can, have their revenge on you. You've got to get rid of them. So you announce an anti-corruption drive. And, in a country that that becomes a dictatorship, you can pretty much bet that 99.9% of the people are in fact corrupt. So the anti-corruption drive is a very convenient way of targeting your enemies and making sure that your friends are put to notice that if they're not careful, they're going to be targeted as well. So that's what Xi Jinping has been doing for the past 14 years, since 2012. And actually, Zhang Youxiao was considered to be one of Xi Jinping's allies. But also in a dictatorship, especially a communist dictatorship, I would say especially a communist dictatorship, there are no permanent allies. And I think Zhang Youxiao is probably finding that out right about now. Another member of the commission, Liu Zhenli, has also been placed under investigation by China's ruling Communist Party, a defense ministry statement said. So this is a defense ministry statement. It's official. It's not speculation. It's not rumor. Liu is the chief of staff of the commission's joint staff department. The commission is the top military body in China. And although CNN does not make the point here, it is not the military of China, right? It is the military of the Chinese Communist Party. This is as if the Democrat Party in America had its own military, and the United States of America did not have a military. There was no United States Army, United States Air Force, United States Navy. You'd only have the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard that are loyal to and run by the Democratic Party, for example. Okay, that's not a very good situation to have, is it? Fortunately, we do not have that situation in the United States yet. We may be going in that direction, but not yet. But in China, that's the way it's always been. That's the way it's always been, right? This was the military that Mao Zedong used to defeat the nationalists in the civil war that ended in 1949. And so it was established by the Communist Party for the Communist Party, and it is of the Communist Party. So anyway, the statement did not provide any details of the alleged wrongdoing. Well, they don't need to. Take your pick. Take your pick. They don't need to. Zhang, who is 75, joined the People's Liberation Army in 1968 and is a general from its ground forces. The Communist Party expelled the other vice chair of the commission, Ho Weidong, last October and replaced him with commission member Zhang Shengmin, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so this is the major development that I was referring to in China. Okay, now is speculation time. What does this mean? Sue, especially what does it mean in terms of the potential invasion of Taiwan or not? So there are two ways I think of looking at this. One is that I've often, heard, and of course, just because I've heard it doesn't mean it's true, but I've often heard that Zhang Youxia was actually, uh, as a military man, saying Xi Jinping, "We're not ready." Okay, I know you, and I understand the importance of invading Taiwan. I understand, the political importance and everything else, but we're not ready to go head to head with the Americans. Um, and Xi Jinping was actually the hardliner who was saying, well, you know, um, you, anyway, do your best. Or anyway, Xi Jinping is the one who wanted to speed things up. And we know that recently we had a situation where the Chinese um, Navy and Air Force sort of surrounded Taiwan Island and demonstrated how they could blockade the island in case of an invasion. And it's possible that now Xi Jinping said to Zhang Youxia, "Look, you proved actually that you could blockade. It was a very successful military exercise. So I want you to go ahead and start the invasion in a relatively close date. And if you can't do it, then I'll get someone who can." And maybe that's what's going on. So maybe Zhang's fall from grace. And by the way, if you're in China, if you're a top official in the Communist Party, and they say that you're under investigation, you are already cooked. Okay, you are already cooked. There is no presumption of innocence. Okay, so if they start the investigation, or if they if they announce that there's an investigation going on, there's been an investigation going on for quite some time, and you're already guilty. You're already guilty. And I wouldn't be. And some people, of course, are saying that Zhang has been arrested. That he was arrested a couple of days ago. Actually, I saw. Actually, was it anyway? It was the last couple of days, within the last 48 hours, I think. I saw a YouTube video by someone who reports on this kind of stuff that Zhang and others, about 17 others, had been arrested. And this sort of confirmed that this tends to confirm that, although the defense ministry is not saying that they were arrested, but it's kind of implied, because if you're under investigation, if they say you're under investigation, if they make it public, especially in an official statement, yeah, you're deep in the dungeons. And that's pretty much taken for granted. So he and others, maybe about, according to that other person who was reporting, about 17 others, perhaps, and perhaps even more, uh, were arrested recently. So, so maybe Xi Jinping is going to order an invasion relatively soon. And a lot of people say that that would be a bad idea. And you know what? They're probably right. Most like I agree, they're probably right. But remember, 4 years ago today, or 4 years ago, right about this time, what was I saying? I was saying that Vladimir Putin will not invade Ukraine. Do you remember that? If not, thank you. I was saying because it would be a bad idea. And you know what? Looking back 4 years, I was right. It was a bad idea, wasn't it? But the problem with dictators, okay, is they don't listen to us. They don't listen to us. They don't take our advice. And that's the thing about being a dictator. You don't have to listen to the King's Report or anybody else for that matter. You don't have to listen to CNN or any. You can do what you want. And that's sort of the upside and the downside of being a dictator. Because if you have a stupid idea and you do it, then you're probably going to pay the consequences. So, even though it is a bad idea for Xi Jinping to invade Taiwan, and if he were a more reasonable person, a more strategic person, he probably would. But also remember Hitler, right? Hitler also did not trust his generals, and it was a bad idea for him to invade Russia, wasn't it? The Soviet Union. It was a bad idea. Yeah. It was also a bad idea for Hitler to try and invade England. If he had just been satisfied with France and in the Low Countries and maybe okay Scandinavia, then a lot of people think that he might have lasted a very long time. But no, but he had to do something stupid, and this is the thing about being a dictator. Uh, and something similar about Japan with Pearl Harbor. There's a lot of speculation on what would have happened if Japan had not invaded Pearl Harbor. Maybe Japan, if they had been satisfied with the Philippines and Indonesia and Malaysia and Singapore, then maybe Japan could have done a lot better, would have lasted a lot longer. So dictators tend to make stupid mistakes, and this may be Xi Jinping's stupid mistake. Of course, in the process of making that stupid mistake, uh, a lot of people die, and that's the downside. That is the downside. Yes, a lot of people die. So we'll have to see what happens. But on the other hand, so that's one view. The other view is that, well, since the top guy and many others were recently arrested, and also prior to that, other military leaders have also been arrested. So there must be a lot of turnover right now within the Chinese military. And that would seem to indicate that they're actually less ready than before to stage a major military operation, such as invading Taiwan. That also makes sense. But again, it comes down to what the dictator wants, right? If he wants his eggs scrambled, he gets them scrambled. If he wants them sunny side up, he gets them sunny side up, and no one can tell him otherwise. And if he gets up one day and says, "I want to invade Taiwan," the invasion is on. Right. And um, if his generals disagree with him, then he can arrest them too for corruption or whatever. So really now uh, seems to come down to Xi Jinping's individual decision-making process. What does he want to do? What does he want to do? And when does he want to do it? So we'll basically, bottom line is we don't know. Bottom line is we don't know. We don't know. We do not know. So we have to be, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Basically, I think is the best advice we can give ourselves right now. Please. Of course, me and those of you who are watching have a very special and urgent reason to hope that such an invasion does not take place. Um, so let's pray. Let's pray. God, cannot intervene in human portion of responsibility, but when we pray, we create conditions that God can then use. Because remember, uh, God, this is why the symbolic offering of Abraham was important. This is why his willingness to sacrifice Isaac was important. This is why the willingness of Jesus to offer himself as an innocent sacrifice on the cross was important. These were all conditions that allowed God, that enabled God, let's say, that enabled God to do his work in the world. And this is an important part of Father's teaching. And we can offer such conditions through our prayers and through other conditions that we may be inspired to make. Okay, so let's do that. But I think one important condition, which the king has asked us to make, is to join him on God's Day next month. And I think if you want to make a strong condition in this area, um, then I think pushing aside all the reasons for not joining him, and I know there are many jobs and others, finances and others. But pushing aside those and just joining him, I think, would be a very strong condition to allow or enable him, I should say, enable God to do what is his will, to do what is his will. Now, I'm not presuming what that will is. I'm not presuming that. It could be that a failed invasion would actually be God, because surely a failed invasion would certainly what common sense would tell us that would spell the end of Xi Jinping. Although the end of Xi Jinping in itself, as I've often said, is not the same as the end of the Communist Party regime. They'll simply replace him with someone else. But who they're gonna replace him with now? I mean, he's already, I mean, Zhang was one of the possible replacements. So who are they going to replace him if Xi Jinping falls? So, but I don't know. I don't know. So, but we leave that up to God. We leave that up to God. But we make the conditions, and God will use those conditions as He will, so as to further His will. That is uh, my idea. Okay. All right. So, and we will have to see, over the next few days or weeks, what will happen. Because let's see here, the God's Day. Today's the sixth day, and God's Day, of course, is the 17th on the solar calendar, which is, let's see here, 1, 2, 3. That's a Tuesday. Tuesday, 3, 10, 17. So we're about 3 weeks and 1, 2, 3, 4. So I guess we're about 24 days from God's Day, aren't we? So yeah, it's 4 weeks from last Tuesday. Yeah. So it's coming up. It is coming up. Yes. Yeah, it is coming up. Okay. All right. Enough of that for now, for today. We will continue to see how this goes. And does Young have allies? Well, I don't know. I mean, they seem to have pretty much arrested everybody that they need to arrest. So we'll have to see. Okay. All right. Now let's see. Sticking with Asia, I guess. Okay, yeah, okay. Uh, let's do this one. Oh, sorry. Oh, I see. I'm already sharing this with you. All right, Pentagon to reduce its role in deterrence of North Korea. So, yeah, this is something that's been cooking for the past few months. We had the one of the top American generals in Korea saying that we want the U.S. forces Korea to expand their role, which you could read into that. And I think I did mention at that time that meant that they would be sort of reducing their role in deterring North Korea. And now I guess it's sort of confirmed. The Pentagon foresees a more limited role in deterring North Korea, with South Korea taking primary responsibility for the task. A Pentagon policy document released on Friday said, in a move likely to raise concern in Seoul. And well, sort of. Well, if you say Seoul, of course, there are many parts of Seoul, and if I think this, who's writing this? Who is writing this? The Guardian, I see. Okay, communist paper. It will certainly raise concern among conservatives in Seoul, but it may actually be something that the current leftist government uh, would welcome, kind of, yeah, because they don't want to deter North Korea. They don't want to, South Korea hosts about 28,500 U.S. troops in combined defense against North Korea's military threat, and Seoul has raised its defense budget by 7.5% this year. South Korea is capable of taking primary responsibility for deterring North Korea, but with critical but more limited U.S. support, said the National Defense Strategy, a document that guides the Pentagon's policies. And there's a lot of truth to that, I think. There's a lot of truth to that. It depends on how you assess the North Korea's military capabilities. Of course, in terms of conventional weapons, probably it is true, but North Korea also has chemical and biological weapons in addition to nuclear weapons. And well, there is the long range artillery that will, if used, will reduce Seoul to ashes within half an hour and kill hundreds of thousands of people in a very, very short time. That is, but what are the Americans going to do about that? No. So deterrence, I think, is probably the best thing. But North Korea, I think, still will understand that if they do something like that, then the United States or maybe South Korea will um, destroy the North Korean regime. So it's kind of a mutual assured destruction, I suppose. Anyway, we'll see how this plays out. This shift in the balance of responsibility is consistent with America's interest in updating U.S. forces posture on the Korean Peninsula. So the United States obviously wants to use U.S. forces Korea to target China more and Russia also, but especially China. Although they may not be saying it, but China understands that to be true. And also, the U.S. probably would like to use U.S. forces Korea in the event of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. In recent years, some U.S. officials have signaled a desire to make U.S. forces in South Korea more flexible to operate outside the Korean Peninsula in response to a broader range of threats, such as defending Taiwan and checking China's growing military reach. Yes, South Korea has resisted the idea of shifting the role of U.S. troops because they want to maintain friendship. They want to maintain friendly relations with the Chinese Communist Party, especially the current people, right? The people who are currently in charge, but has worked to grow its defense capabilities in the past 20 years to take on a wartime command of the combined U.S. Korean forces. South Korea has 450,000 troops. So, and I don't think that they have that wartime command yet. It's been discussed, and actually, it was the Americans that kept delaying it. I remember it was supposed to happen, and the South Koreans said, "Oh, please wait." Until now. So I think kind of maybe the Americans are sort of throwing down the gauntlet and says, okay, we're giving you a deadline now. That maybe what's happening here. The shift is part of what Washington has called alliance modernization under the Trump administration. South Korean President Xi Jinping has himself pushed for greater defense autonomy. Yeah, he wants to have defense autonomy so that South Korea is not being used to check China, is what he wants, criticizing in September what he called the submissive mindset that self-reliant defense is impossible without foreign troops. In a statement on Saturday, South Korea's defense ministry said U.S. forces in Korea remained central to the alliance and would continue to deter North Korean aggression, which is at least that is true on the face of it, yes. The Pentagon document makes no mention of denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula, the second major strategy paper to omit the language. Yes, and I think maybe people are finally beginning to admit that North Korea is not going to give up its nuclear weapons under the current regime, that there will have to be regime change in order for North Korea to give up those weapons. And perhaps even there will have to be a unification of the peninsula under a pro-US, shall we say, or at least a pro-US, but at least a what shall I say, somewhat responsible member of international society regime in South Korea. Unification of the peninsula under such a regime for the international society or the international community then to pressure South Korea or pressure the unified Korea into giving up those weapons. And this is what happened after the fall of the Soviet Union. Places like Ukraine had lots of nuclear weapons. But and the new people in Ukraine at the time didn't want to have anything to do with those weapons, and so they said, "Yeah, please come and get them." And they were taken away. And I think other places like Kazakhstan, I think, also had nuclear weapons. The Soviet Union had based their nuclear missiles in some of those places, and they were all dealt with. And I think something similar is certain to happen in a unified Korea. And in fact, Korea will not allow, well, will be blocked by, Russia, China, United States, Japan. All these four countries surrounding Korea will block the unification unless uh, the incoming incoming regime of a unified Korea agrees to those conditions. The Biden administration in 2022 explicitly stated complete and verifiable denuclearization as a goal. So this has always, not just Biden, but this has always been the last, at least for the past several decades, has been the sort of the mantra of the United States and of China. But recently, China also has been deleting this phrase, denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula. So it looks like North Korea has basically won that battle of being recognized as a nuclear possessing country, which has been one of their major goals, suggesting Washington may be shifting towards managing North Korea's nuclear arsenal rather than seeking its elimination. Um, Either that, or they're going to wait. They're going to work towards the unification of the peninsula. And it's interesting because if China wants nuclear weapons to be eliminated from the Korean Peninsula, then they also have to work with Seoul, right? They also have to recognize that the that there has to be a regime change in North Korea in order for the nuclear weapons to be eliminated. And from China's perspective, having nuclear weapons being operated by a, shall we say, mercurial regime on its border is not the best thing to happen in the world, right? From China's point of view. So it's interesting because Seoul and Beijing may work together to do something here over the next, 3, 4, 5 years. Interesting. I think we can watch and see that. The wide-ranging document, which each new administration publishes, said the Pentagon's priority was defending the homeland. In the Indo-Pacific region, the document said the Pentagon was focused on ensuring China could not dominate the U.S. or its allies. This does not require a regime change or some other existential struggle. Well, yes, it does. It does. They're just saying this, right? These diplomatic documents, uh, diplomats are trained to lie through the teeth. And this is one of those lies. Okay? And they know it. They know it. We're not disagreeing with them. They know this is not true. Of course, it requires regime change. Of course, it requires existential struggle. but, we're not. But we're supposed to pretend that it doesn't. Okay. Rather, a decent peace on terms favorable to Americans, but that China can also accept and live under is possible. The document said, without mentioning Taiwan by name, in the roughly 25-page document. China claims okay, we got that. All right, okay. All right, so yeah, the diplomats lie, but we know that they're lying. They know they're lying. They know that we know they're lying. So it's okay. It's all good. It's all good. There are certain things that they're supposed to say, and they say them, and we let them say it. Okay, okay. All right, next. Russia, Ukraine, and the U.S. hold first trilateral talks since the start of the war. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Friday it is still too early to draw conclusions from the trilateral talks taking place between Ukraine, Russia, and the United States. Delegations from the three countries are in the United Arab Emirates for what officials say is the first trilateral meeting since Russia launched a full-scale invasion on Ukraine almost 4 years ago in February 2022. They are talking about the parameters of ending the war, Zelensky said in his daily evening address, as hundreds of thousands in Kyiv remain without power due to Russia's relentless attacks. The talks in Abu Dhabi, expected to extend into Saturday, are at a technical level and do not include heads of state, but is still a notable diplomatic engagement amid the ongoing fighting. U.S. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll is participating in the trilateral peace talks with Ukrainian and Russian officials in Abu Dhabi, effectively serving as the Pentagon's representative in the discussions, according to a U.S. official. General Alexis, maybe these people all have these weird names. The top U.S. commander overseeing forces in Europe is also a part of the meetings. Trump administration officials had projected confidence over reaching a deal in recent days, saying territorial control of eastern Ukraine is the last remaining sticking point. Well, that's like saying the Pacific Ocean is the last remaining sticking point for me to be able to swim from Korea to California. It's a pretty big sticking point. But that issue is arguably the most difficult. Amen to that, yes. And many experts remain skeptical an argument is possible yet. Yeah, I'm one of those. I'm one of those skeptical. I'm not an expert, but I do remain skeptical. Yes. In a WhatsApp group chat with Ukrainian reporters earlier Friday, Zelensky said the Donbass issue is key. And President Donald Trump's lead negotiators, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner met for 4 hours with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Kremlin into the early hours of Friday, but the Kremlin afterwards indicated there was no breakthrough and vowed to continue fighting unless Ukraine cedes all of its Donbass region and agrees to a number of other heavy Russian demands. So obviously, Russia is not compromising. So how can you say that you're close to an agreement unless they're saying that Ukraine is close to putting up the white flag? That's the only way that I can see that an agreement is in the works here, which may not be wrong. That's possible. Ahead of the meeting with Putin, which they left out here, Witkoff on Thursday said that negotiations between Russia and Ukraine are now down to one issue. Donbass, yes, we know that. And we have discussed iterations of that issue, and that means it's solvable, Witkoff said on Davos Thursday. Well, one solution, which I think may be likely, is that Ukraine says, okay, we give up. Go ahead and take whatever you want. That would be one of the solutions, right? One possible solution. So that's certainly possible. So what about the other solution where Russia says, okay, we give up, you keep whatever you want? How likely is that? I don't think it's very likely. When Trump was asked what concessions Putin needs to make during the upcoming talks, Trump didn't mention any specifics, but it did indicate that concessions from Putin are on the table. He'll make concessions, Trump said. Everybody's making concessions to get it done. Okay. But are the concessions meaningful? Zelensky met with Trump in Davos at the World Economic Forum on Thursday, but the talks between the two lasted for about an hour. This is the last mile, which is the most difficult, Zelensky said following the meeting. The dialogue is not easy, but it was possible. It was positive. After the meeting, however, Zelensky issued a sharp rebuke to Europe for not doing enough to stop Russia. Okay, so okay, and Witkoff and Kushner met with Putin, along with Josh Grunbaum, who has been newly appointed by Trump as the senior advisor to his board of peace. And on the Russian side, the meeting was attended by presidential aide Yuri Ushakov and investment envoy Kirill Dmitriev, according to the Kremlin. And then after the meeting, Ushakov indicated Putin will still only accept an agreement that hands control of Donbass to Russia. There you go. There you go. There you go. Okay. Exactly. So where's the concession? As Moscow alleges was outlined during the summit between Putin and Trump in Alaska last summer. And this is Ushakov again. The main thing is that during these negotiations between our president and the Americans, it was once again stated. So they're holding to their position, once again stated, that without resolving the territorial issue according to the formula agreed to in Anchorage, one should not expect to achieve a long-term settlement. There you go. So they're saying, hey, They're saying Ukraine has to put up the white flag. Ukraine has to give us everything we're asking for, the entire Donbass, including areas that are currently occupied by Ukrainian forces. And Ushakov is making it very clear that, you know, stated once again. So they're not changing. They're not compromising even one comma, one period. So I think President Trump is, he's a deal maker, and being a deal maker, he doesn't always give us a sort of accurate play to play. He doesn't always tell us how the sausage is being made accurately. Uh, anyway, so I think this is going to end up with it's going to end up with Russia taking all of Donbass. It's getting more and more clear, and I think Zelensky is going to have to live with it. Um it may likely mean the end of his term, potentially end of his life, but I don't see what other choice Ukraine has. Anyway, here, Yushkov maintained that the Russian Federation is sincerely interested in resolving the Ukrainian crisis. Yes, of course, through political and diplomatic methods. Of course, yes. Everybody would rather get what they want through political and diplomatic methods. No one likes to be sending people to war to die. No one likes that. But wouldn't retreat on the battlefield during negotiations. Right? Of course, we want to accomplish our goals through political and diplomatic methods. Well, that's a given. That's nothing new. While this is not the case, Russia will continue to consistently achieve the goals set for the special military operation on the battlefield. So they're not compromising any of their objectives that they set forth for themselves 4 years ago, where the Russian armed forces have a strategic initiative, Yushkov said. And Russia's invasion has killed hundreds of thousands of Russians and Ukrainian soldiers, razed whole Ukrainian cities, and forced over 5 million to flee the country, according to the UN. All right, et cetera, et cetera. In Davos, Zelensky suggested he doubted Russia is ready to reach a peace deal, saying, "I'm not sure Putin wants to end this war in a situation where he is. Maybe they want to find compromises. We are open to different steps." And I said that there are two sides that compromise, said Zelensky. Russians will not win this war. They do not win and will not. They did not win and will not. Well, I didn't share that with you. I apologize. Okay. Anyway, let me just share the headline with you so that you can find it if you want. Russia, okay. Russia, Ukraine, and U.S. hold first trilateral talks since the start of the war. That's the title. Unfortunately, yes, and it shows how difficult it is to deal with a situation where basically you have a David and Goliath situation where Goliath is not giving up, and David does not have the means with which to bring Goliath down. And you can help Goliath. You can keep feeding him stones from round stones from the river and all that, but eventually, unless David is able to put one right there in the middle of the forehead and at least to knock Goliath out and then go up to him and take his sword and cut off his head. Unless David is able to do that, Goliath is going to win. And I think this is a clear case where Goliath is going to win, unfortunately. Well, I guess it's unfortunate, but I don't know. What is God's will here? God's will certainly does not involve his children fighting each other on the battlefield. That is for sure. Also, I just wanted to point something out that foreign holdings, recently there's been some talk about foreign holdings of U.S. treasuries. I don't know how to segue into that from the Ukrainian war, but there's been some talk, and I just wanted to show you this graph. This is a graph of foreign holdings of U.S. Treasuries. Um, and as you can see, they're not going down. It's not going down at all. This is as of November. And this is where January 2025, so basically the end of the Biden administration, the beginning of the second Trump administration. And when President Trump came into power, then there was a huge jump in foreigners holding U.S. Treasuries. And March, and then there was some decline there, but then it jumped back up. And then during the summer in August, there was a big jump, and then a little bit of a decline September and October, by what is that? By about 10 billion each month. But then in November, there was another jump so that they're now 9.26 billion to 9.36 billion. So $100 billion increases since August. Um, Recently, what was it? Denmark, the pension program in Denmark said, "Oh, yeah, they didn't say why, but they said we're going to sell $100 billion of U.S. Treasuries," and everybody's saying, "Oh, look, look how this has caused the worldwide bond market and worldwide stock markets to crash because Denmark says it's going to sell $100 million of 100 million, right? $100 million of U.S. Treasuries." But as I think it was Scott Bessent or was it Howard Lutnick said, "Oh, that's irrelevant." And then the Europeans came back and said, "Oh, no, they said that Denmark is irrelevant. Oh, shame on them." But it is irrelevant. It is irrelevant. $100 million, especially not just in the foreign holdings, but if you look at the overall U.S. Treasury market, U.S. bond, sort of a government bond market, which I think is something like $30 trillion. So 100 million is not even a drop in the bucket. It's not even a drop. It's less than a drop. But people are trying to find ways, desperately trying to find ways to undermine President Trump and to say bad things about President Trump. And they will use anything as an excuse to do that. And I think the sale of the $100 million of Denmark pension fund U.S. Treasuries was probably one of those things. It's kind of pathetic to watch them try to do this, because they understand now that President Trump is a force unto himself, and uh, they can either join him or they can get out of his way. But if they choose not to do either, then he's going to run them over. And right now, President Trump says that there is an armada, a U.S. Navy armada now is headed towards Iran. Armada is a funny way to put it because, the Spanish Armada didn't fare very well if we go back and look at history. That was, I would kind of avoid that term myself. But anyway, big naval force is headed towards Iran. And looks like President Trump wants to put an end to the regime in Iran, but without saying, no, we're not talking about regime change. Um, you know, we just want to punish some bad guys. But of course, regime change is exactly what he's trying to do. Just hope he doesn't get involved in nation building, which is a very dangerous thing to do. And Venezuela, I think so far, he's sort of selling the oil, I guess, and Venezuela says that they're getting some of that money. At least, I think, what is it, $300 million, something like that they received from sale of their oil. Also, President Trump says that U.S. companies will start drilling oil in Venezuela soon, although I'm not sure what the oil companies are thinking about that. They're a little bit skittish, of course, because they've been nationalized twice before in Venezuela. So they're not too eager to get back in there. But we'll see. And then also Cuba, reports say that President Trump intends to bring down the communist regime in Cuba by the end of this year. So he's a busy man. He's a very busy man. And oh, by the way, there are midterm elections coming up in November. we'll have to see what happens with that. And the tariffs, the Supreme Court still has not ruled on the tariffs. There was some expectation that they would do that last Tuesday. They didn't. And one explanation of that was that the Supreme Court was not going to act one way or the other while the president was overseas. And traditionally, this has sort of been the etiquette of US politics, that you don't put the president in a bad position or do anything major that affects the president while he is overseas, while he's out of the country. That rule has been broken many times recently, but some speculation is that the Supreme Court was maybe keeping to that rule, and that is why they did not announce a decision last Tuesday. They may do so this coming Tuesday now. We'll have to wait and see what comes there. Okay? But yeah, it's going to be interesting. All right, so that's pretty much what we need to look at today. Let's take a look and make sure that there's nothing else urgent coming up right now. Okay, the Iran's Revolutionary Guard commander warns the U.S., says its force has its finger on the trigger. Yes. Okay. Uh, we got this Arctic blast, I guess, moving across the U.S. right now. 8,234 stores wiped out in record retail collapse across the U.S. Experts warn bloodbath will only get worse. And yet the GDP is doing rather well, isn't it? So, but this, of course, is another way to try and say that President Trump is failing. But if you look at the actual numbers, he's not failing. Okay, and German economists push for gold repatriation from U.S. vaults. Yes. I can see why. Okay. KLM, that's the Dutch airline, and Air France suspend flights to Middle East as Iran warns U.S. attack will mean all-out war, in quotes. And China built a vast oil stake in Venezuela. Now it risks getting muscled out. Yes. And apparently, President Trump has ended the discount that China was receiving from Venezuela on the purchase of oil. You got to see this headline. I love this. I hope no one is offended. Minnesota church stormer gets arrested with two pairs of handcuffs due to extraordinary rotundness. Okay, we know. Okay. This is MSN, right? Very, very leftist. And they would rather die than use the F word. They're not going to accuse anybody of being fat. But so they're not fat, they're rotund. Okay. All right. Okay. Oh boy. What is this? Naomi Osaka responds to the demographic criticizing her 2026 Australian Open outfit. Okay, well, I'm not sure I want to look at that. All right, so that's about it. That's about it. Okay. Let's look at, I guess, let's take a peek at Breitbart. Judges reject DOJ request to detain leftist protesters accused of invading Minnesota church. Well, because they don't have enough handcuffs. They have to string together 2, 3, 4 handcuffs, maybe. Anyway, okay. Sorry. I'm rather rotund myself. Okay, and getting rotunder by the day. So, all right. Let's see here. Animal Protection Group warns pets, livestock at risk. Yes. Okay. And Human Health and Human Services Department bans using aborted baby body parts for taxpayer-funded research. Well, that's good. That's good. Hmm. And James Carville, the clown of the Democrats, Trump is trying to create a race war, and he's always saying things. Of course, he's not an objective commentator. He's a strategist, and he's always saying things that he thinks are going to help the Democrats win elections. And I guess that's one of the things that he wants to say now. All right, gotta go. Today's Saturday. Yes. So I will see you Monday, right? Yes. So have a good time at church tomorrow. God bless, Godspeed. May his kingdom come quickly.